This
Everybody,
conference will now be recorded.
do we have anybody online?
Looks like we have Molly, and Molly, if you just verify that it's just you that's attending.
Yep, it's just mine. It's just me. Just Molly.
All right.
Cal is not.
Yep, and you're from Trajectory Energy, correct?
Yep.
All right, and she's legal counsel for them. Thank you, Kelly, for doing that.
I'd like to call the meeting to order, and Frank, does the governor still have emergency orders in place?
That's correct.
Could you go ahead and put that in the record?
All right, so, because Governor Pritzker does have the declaration in place, we are allowed to meet virtually. However, we do have all of the zoning board members that are attending in person. We would be able to meet virtually. And we also have this available to the public to attend virtually, and we have that on our agenda. So they do have the ability to attend that way.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Can we have a roll call, please?
If you don't mind.
Yes. Booker,
Here.
Everett,
Yes.
Eubank,
Yes.
Coney, McDougal.
And
Oh,
Penny.
Sorry.
yes.
Okay, if I could just skip down to new business just briefly. Did you ever hear back from Mr. Cook?
Yes, and he said that he is not interested in being a member, so
So we still need
there's only
another
one
person.
more zoning board member. So if anybody knows of a person that may want to be a member, let us know. As somebody that I, as village president, would appoint with the advice and consent of the board, so.
Okay, I'd like to go back to number 4 on the agenda. Does anybody have a conflict of interest with respect to the matters we're going to be discussing tonight? And is there any public comment? I guess that would be Molly, if anybody.
Yeah, and
Can you,
I don't think Molly signed up for public comment.
No, I don't have a comment at this time.
okay, thank you. Approval of the minutes of December 5th. Did everybody get a red line? I guess it's basically Mike and Frank, because, I'm sorry, your first name again? Riley, you weren't a member of the board at that time, so you really don't know. Sometimes they're correct.
But you did get a copy.
Yeah, I do have
Yeah, so you were on there. Okay.
I'd entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved. I'll second that.
Okay, is there any changes or additions that anybody needs to make? I know I did not see any, it seemed fine to me.
Yeah, I didn't see any after the added language.
Okay, I would entertain then a motion to approve these minutes as redlined by Attorney Gaziano.
So I think we have a motion pending to approve,
Oh, you did
The
it,
minutes.
sorry.
and they were seconded, so, and I guess to follow to the T Governor Pritzker's declaration, we are, if we're gonna have a virtual type presence, we have to have everything by roll call. So I'd feel more comfortable if we did it by roll call,
Yes,
even though we're all here.
I think that's the best way to proceed.
Everett,
Yes.
Eubank,
Yes.
Pitney,
Yes.
Booker.
Yes.
And then Kelly, just so I'm clear, are you just going to accept the changes then and print it? Okay.
Okay, the next matter would be the minutes of January 23rd. Is there a motion to approve these, I guess?
I'll make a motion to approve. Second. I do have a comment on some changes. And I don't know if there's a different version out there, but the version that I have, if you look at page 1 under public comment, the next item is approval of minutes, December 5th, 2022. And The fourth line down in the middle, it starts the sentence, it says Attorney Gaziano stated that due to the subject matter of the last meeting, it determined the specificity of the minutes. Mr. Eubank agreed. I think there should be some changes to the language to make it read properly. And so I would state that we strike the word "the" after the word "stated." And then,
I think
Add
what,
the word
I was
that.
trying to say that it was determined,
It was
there needed to
determined,
be
it
more
was.
specificity to the minutes.
right, so how it should be written is as follows. Attorney Gaziano stated that due to the subject matter of the last meeting, it was determined the added specificity of the minutes were required. And so that's how it should read. So we should delete the word "the" after stated, insert "that." And then after the word, or after the phrase "meeting at," it should be "was," should be inserted. And then determine the, and then the word "added" should be added. And then at the end, where it says minutes, we should have the words "were required." Because I think that really, Mary, that's what you were referring to, is we need the extra specificity for that reason. And then my second modification would be the next group down, it says the zoning test amendment, RTMP, which should be text amendment. And those are the only two items that I saw in here that I thought needed to be corrected.
And then on that same line, month, apostrophe S.
Right, yeah. So I guess I'll modify my motion, since I'm the one that made it, and just say I'd like to approve the minutes as modified.
Take a roll call vote, please.
Eubank,
Yes.
Haley,
Yes.
Booker,
Yes.
Hunter.
Abstain, I wasn't at that meeting, so I don't know what happened.
And I don't know, I didn't want to interrupt, but at the top of those, it said January 27th, was that changed?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, the next matter on the agenda is discussion about public hearing for rezoning of Cash Drive property. I would ask Frank to give us a status of what's happening there. Is there still somebody that wants a zoning change? What zoning change do they want? Do they put something in writing to us? I know that I did receive an email that they might want to back out of their purchase, but I don't know if that's.
Yeah, so let me give an update, and Mary, I'm gonna rely on you to fill in any gaps.
Okay,
So we have Ryan Winter and Joe Cap, who are purchasers of the vacant lot directly east of Dollar General. They own that, they want to build storage units on that. It is currently zoned general business. They met with Chad and me about some village matters, and Chad suggested that maybe they might want to buy some village property. They ended up making an offer for an item that we just approved the platting of, and it's plat number 2, or lot number 2 in the plat for the Highlands on Cash Drive, and that's about 1.11 acres. They're currently under contract with the village to purchase it, and then they would want that also to be for storage.
Are you familiar with what he's talking about? Would you like to see a copy of the plat?
I know what you're talking about. Yeah. You're talking about immediately east.
Yeah.
Right, so
Is what they
So
own.
behind
But
the
then the village also just replatted 3 more lots, right?
this,
East of that.
I think we talked about this one at the January meeting.
We did.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
We did talk about
yep, so this is that plat, and so we're talking about the lot 2 right behind that vacant lot behind Dollar General. So that, they want to purchase, but they have concerns about the timing. If they can't get the zoning and the sale and the special use all in place by the end of April, then economically, they don't want to pursue the village-owned lot. They just want to develop their own lot that they've purchased. So that was what I sent to Bill, just letting him know that they had this time deadline. We can meet that deadline, just.
We can't.
We can, although there could be things that jump up that give us a roadblock where we can't, and it just depends on what this board will do at the next meeting. But what we need to have first is, we need to have, because they want to take the village-owned property, which is gonna be general industrial, and they wanna change that, I believe, to general business district. Then they'll take both properties and want to use a special use for the self-storage. So, the village has agreed to partner with them to allow them to come to zoning to petition for a zoning change and a special use permit. Because we're the property owner of that lot, so we have to give them permission as the buyer to come in before the board. And so what we need to do is we need to schedule a public hearing so that anybody out there can object to or give their feelings about whether we should rezone that parcel from general industrial to general business district. And I don't know if at the same time, but I think we would also have in there that they want to do a special use for then storage units. So then people could come out and say, hey, we like that, or we don't like that, or whatever, but at least we have to have a public hearing to listen to this. And so what I would ask is that the zoning board tonight set a public hearing at the, just a little bit before the next board or zoning board meeting, like at 5:55, so that we can have the public hearing. And then at the next zoning board meeting itself, we can then review what was discussed at the public hearing and determine if what they're asking for is appropriate or not. And that would be then the March zoning board meeting. And if we have a decision at the March zoning board meeting as to whether they can, number one, rezone, number two, get the special use, then that can be brought to the village board at their April board meeting, which is the second Monday in April, which would then, if the village board said, yes, we're good with that, would allow for them to then know before the 28th of April, which I think is their deadline. So that's why we could fall into that time frame. But if at our March meeting, the zoning board doesn't make the determination because A, they either need more information, or B, they deny it and the village board denies it, well, then it's not going to move forward. So
What paperwork documents have they provided with respect to their special use? I know that I saw a diagram of what they wanted to build.
Right.
I would like to get that to the zoning board members ahead of time so they can look at that, so they know what issues might be in their mind prior to the hearing, to make the hearing a little bit more meaningful and to make our discussion more meaningful. I know I had one issue with respect to what looked like the drives and access to fire trucks and stuff. So can we, if they've given it to us, can we get that to the members? If they haven't given it to us, can they do that, give it to the village and get it to the members so we have it a couple of weeks before our meeting?
Right. So we did have a meeting with those two. I think, Bill, you were present. You had just gotten better over an illness. And Mary was there, I was there. We had Casper, our building inspector there. And I don't know if we had anybody else there, Seth maybe, or he was.
The virtual?
Might have been virtual. But anyway, we had a group meeting, and at that meeting, they had filled out the zoning application that has not yet been approved by the village, but I gave it to them as a test to see how it was. So I know they filled that out. Now, Mary, did you collect that from them?
You gave it to me, I have.
You have it. So what I would ask is if Mary, if you could scan and email that to everybody, because it has information on there. But that, I don't know if it was pre-application meeting or at least the meeting, they were trying to find out what they needed. And so they wanted to know, what do we need for the different aspects? And I don't remember exactly what we requested, but I know that, I think Seth must have been there, because I think he was talking about what would likely be needed for certain plans and that they should have their engineer draw certain plans. But I don't know if that was for zoning or if that was for afterwards when they would be looking for a permit to build. So from our perspective, we're determining, number one, should we change the zoning? I don't know that we need to see anything from them about that.
I agree with you on that.
Because it's just a zoning thing. The second thing is, do we want to give them a special use? That's a little more where we need to know kind of what the details are. Because as we've seen with other storage sites, we might want to put specific requirements in for that place. We had at the other place, lighting requirements can be so high up off the ground because we have residents near here.
Right.
Whereas out here, we may not have such stringent requirements because it's a different area. So that, I don't know, what they have for plans. And that's.
And isn't the idea for this one that, is this the one where the village doesn't have a problem if it goes to general business, even if they don't get their special use permit?
Correct.
I mean, I know they care, but we've done other ones where we say, change it to the whatever zoning with a special use permit, that we don't want it to be
This, we
rezoned.
want we want two separate decisions. One for zoning, because I think the village wants it zoned that anyway. Number two, then a separate decision on the special use. And so if they get the okay for the special use on both parcels. So really the only hang up for timing would be the zoning of it. And that we can get done at the next board meeting, I believe. The special use may take time, but that would be a delay on their other property as well. So they would still likely move forward with the purchase of the village property because they know it's going to be zoned for this.
So they would need a special use permit for their other property as well.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So if we delay on that, it's not going to inhibit them from purchasing the village property. So if we have to wait till the April zoning board meeting to come back and say, okay, now you've given us all your particulars, that wouldn't affect the purchase of the village property.
Are you sure about that? That's not how I read the email.
Okay, and I can confirm with them, but,
I questioned
yeah,
if it was really going to cost them that much money to wait 2 or 3 weeks.
I think what they were
I
looking
think they were
at,
trying to pressure.
well, I think what they're looking at is they would like to get started right away. So if they felt that buying the village one was gonna make them take longer, that they wouldn't buy it, they would concentrate on their own property and start building then. But they can't do anything until they get a special use.
Correct.
And so the special use is what may take longer. So I'll explain that to them tomorrow. I'll let them know that. But my impression is then they would be like, okay, we will buy the village lot because we know it's zoned, we don't have to worry about that.
Okay, and I have no problem getting through the process of the special use as long as we get the information ahead of time so we know what we're talking about at the hearing that we're planning on scheduling in March. So if you can get that, if they can get the village something, the village get that to us 2 weeks ahead of time, I don't have a problem of having a hearing that night. You guys?
Right. The only thing you're asking for us tonight is to schedule the
Correct.
public hearing.
Correct. Okay. Yep. Yep. And just kind of give you an overview of what we're looking at. So then when you get this information, you'll kind of have an idea, okay, what are we looking at? Why are we looking at it this way?
And the public hearing is for the zoning change and the special use?
Correct.
I would make a motion then, that we schedule the public hearing prior to the next regularly scheduled zoning board meeting.
And we would typically do that then at 5:55 PM on the same evening.
Do we have a second?
I second that.
Okay.
Roll call vote, please.
Pitney,
Yes.
Booker,
Yes.
Emery,
Yes.
Egan.
Yes.
It's a special use permit for storage unit.
Then it's also, do we have to have a public hearing for the zoning?
Yeah, no, but I want,
Both,
but
yeah.
Okay.
it said zoning change and special use permit, and just in the
Yeah.
notice, I have to put special use permit for what?
Okay,
That's, I
I
just,
wanted to make sure
Wanted to make
you're gonna
sure.
have both in the notice.
yes.
Okay. Okay, next thing on the agenda is the zoning amendment, the RTMP. I have a couple questions I'd like to ask Frank and Mary on this. It's my understanding, one of the reasons why we need to move on this more quickly than taking months is a potential pre-annexation agreement. So if now, I also understand from talking to you guys previously that it's your belief and understanding that the old zoning ordinance applies to the pre-annexation agreement, that the new UDO does not. What we were trying to do with Mary's ordinance was to put the RTMP into our old one as written.
Correct.
As we went through it, we were finding numerous issues. And that's, our red line minutes there, and Mary then changed it, but I hadn't seen that. What, if you were to pass, if the village was to simply pass an ordinance stating that all subsequent pre-annexation agreements fall under the UDO, and you already have your RTMP in here, we don't need to change anything, and we don't have our inconsistencies. A second idea I have is, could the village pass, could the pre-annexation agreement address, and if you can't pass the ordinance to just say it applies, could we go ahead and have a pre-annexation agreement that would allow the annexor to have one or the other under certain circumstances? And then when I started thinking about that more, I was thinking to cover himself, he's got to know that the zoning is going to cover what he wants to do when he annexes in, which raised an issue in my mind. Mary, legally what happens, we enter into a pre-annexation agreement with somebody to come in under RTMP, I just can't remember that. And under our RTMP, right now, we know that its permitted uses include, I think it's District 5 under our old one, and District 5 allows any use except residential. So it allows everything, which we raised the issue at the December meeting. Isn't it kind of superfluous to then, after that, list 15 other things that you can do if you can do everything? So there was discussion at that meeting about, well, maybe we need to amend that so that it doesn't have everything District 5 has. So what happens if somebody comes in under the RTPMP, and then after the fact, after they enter into that pre-annexation agreement, the zoning changes? And the simple change in this case of saying that District 5, everything that District 5 gives you doesn't allow you to do it, would not allow this person who wants to annex to do what he wants to do. It's not going to allow the retail sales, and although it's going to allow the sale of alcohol. Where the District 5 right now under this allows it all because it allows everything. So legally what happens if you enter into pre-annexation agreement and then you change your zoning classification after the fact? Does the person who entered into that agreement just have the right to say, opt out and say, I don't want in? Or are they able to get the old one because the village agreed to it?
I think
I'm
it's-
seeing that confused.
I mean, I see that pre-annexation agreement as a contract, and I just think about what we did with the Corners, when they were going to come in and we didn't know what was gonna happen liquor-wise in the village.
Mhm.
And so they had an opt-out clause in their pre-annexation agreement that basically said, if you ever become dry, that we're out. And that was part of the contract, so I would presume,
So,
Right
in the
right
one
now,
word-
the pre-annexation agreement says either general industrial or the RTMP, because the RTMP really has not been adopted, but that was the other category selected. So technically, the only available option in the petition was general industrial.
Correct.
And so we could approve that for the petitioner to say that that is what it's going to be if that person comes in to the village. And as long as general industrial would allow for that person to obtain a liquor license if needed, and to run the current business, and to have events, if all that can be done in general industrial, then, yeah. Now, maybe general business district is better, but I think the current business is better under general industrial.
I agree that it's better under general industrial, but if that's a way that we could proceed, then we don't need to do this amendment
Correct.
that we're talking about to amend this. We can just do that pre-annexation agreement and then work on getting the UDO in better shape, the way we, we discussed those particular issues. We don't have to hurry through it.
Yeah.
And so then I'm wondering, doesn't that make it moot? Do we really need to make a recommendation in this ordinance to amend the research technology manufacturing part zoning?
And I
Now,
think,
if you really wanted the other zoning, could we make something in the agreement that if that comes into being, that that's the zoning he would have, but then I know he would want a guarantee like you're talking about from the Corners that I'll come in under the other so long as it will allow me to do the 1, 2, 3, 4 things I want to do. It just have to be specified, and if we could do that, we really don't need to address this ordinance.
right, and I agree, the two options you present, we really need to do both. One is to allow the petitioner to come in and just go with the other option of general industrial. That would take care of it for that petitioner. The other, first option you mentioned was the village just had adopt an ordinance or a resolution that says that any party that's going to petition to annex or pre-annex to the village will go through the UDO. And then we could actually say that we're no longer going to follow the ordinance of 1957 and just abolish it and just use the UDO for all new and existing. We could just do away with it tomorrow if the village board wants to do that. Then we don't even have to worry about which one we're looking at. And then we can work on cleaning up the UDO. So in my mind, I had a hard enough time reading the 50 pages or so of the 1957 zoning ordinance and trying to figure out how that applied when I first started. To look at a 319-page UDO and trying to determine when that applies and when the other one applies is very difficult for us, not to mention anybody that comes to the village that wants to do a project here. So I would agree, I would think that if, Mary, if I'm wrong, let me know, but I think if we could somehow just go away from the old 1957 ordinance as soon as possible and just say anything and everything that comes to the village for zoning will go through the UDO, I think we've got everything in the UDO.
yeah, we would just, of course, need to put something, because the UDO says it's right now, it only applies to new.
Right.
Of course, or
So we would update.
we would change that.
Yeah.
The only other comment too, and I don't know if this is where you were going with Bill, but if, say that Meridian Implement came in under general industrial with the idea that then maybe RTMP in the future or something else in the future, you can't put that in the agreement to say that we'll then change it to that, because you have to have the whole, you gotta go through all the process again terms of the public hearing and all of that.
Okay.
Just so that's clear that we can't promise them some sort of zoning.
But they petitioned that they would either be general industrial or the RTMP. And so
Well-
that would be our responsibility to designate which one. And we would work with the petitioner as to which one it would be, right? I mean, that's how I look at it.
I guess I have a question. By doing a pre-annexation agreement, you are guaranteeing them a zoning that they're gonna get.
Well,
But you're saying it has to be in existence.
right, you're telling them that you are rezoning the property, but it's doing it now.
Okay,
You know, it's not that.
through the pre-annexation work.
Right, and
Okay.
it's not saying then if we get this other category in the
In the
future, we'll
future.
automatically give it to you. Because places have tried to do that, and
Okay,
that's been a problem.
well, if he would, I think that the particular person would be inclined to go ahead with the general industrial, and it moots this other issue then.
So, right, so the zoning amendment, RTMP, we no longer have to pursue. This we can just get rid of. So what you just received tonight, we can discard. We're not gonna take this up any longer. Is that what?
That's what I'm suggesting for the reasons that you heard. I want it to be a committee decision as opposed to just myself. Is there any questions or discussion?
This is all moved unless the village just annexes out that far, is that correct?
So we control the zoning within 1.5 miles of our border. And because we have a pre-annexation agreement, then that would allow us, even if they're further than 1.5 miles, if we have a pre-annexation agreement, will allow us to control the zoning
And the building.
in the building. So we actually then, Mary, I have this question because it's kind of like what you're saying, Mike. If we have this pre-annexation agreement and this person, and it's all approved, then do we classify the zoning at that point and the county map is going to show it as our zoning? Or is it going to have the zoning of the county until they're actually annexed into the village?
I believe, and I'll confirm this with the county, because we had some discussion on this of what they show and don't show. But I believe once they have that pre-annexation agreement, they see it as ours.
And I misspoke before because my understanding is what Mary just said, that as soon as the pre-annexation agreement is signed by both parties, they now have the village zone.
Okay.
So, it would allow that person to do what the village zoning allows them to do, as opposed to the county zoning,
I see.
And building.
building.
Are there any other responsibilities that we would bear then?
The only other thing, Mary, was liquor. Do they go to the county for a liquor license or do we?
Well, yeah, he would have to go to the county for a liquor license.
Because it's in the county.
But with the village zoning, because the village, the general industrial allows everything.
Yeah.
And from what you told me, the village liquor license does not limit the liquor in the liquor license ordinance to specific zoning classifications.
Right.
Then that would be a place that is legally capable of selling alcohol.
Yeah.
Now, it's up in the county, so he'd have to get a county license, but he just has to show that he's got the legal ability to sell there. The county then can give him a license and the state can give him a license. He can't get a village license because it's not in the village. Right now, given the zoning that he has, he would not be able to get a liquor license because the county classification he has does not allow the sale of alcohol. The village is interesting in that it's like a layer. You've got your residential, single family, then you got your two family that allows you to do the residential and two family. You get to the business, you can do everything under, you go up, you get to the general industrial, it allows you to do everything below that, except for residential, I think.
So the RTMP would be out, it would fall under general industrial.
Yeah.
And he's well aware of what the implications of general industrial, and we feel that's the best fit.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we'll talk.
And given where it's at, you know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
right? So I mean, it's kind of industrial out there anyway.
And rather, Ag's Meridian
Industrial.
Yeah.
nursery out there on Cunningham.
Yeah, he just wants to-
Just before you get
Facilities.
to
Yeah.
Meridian
Okay.
Road.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about is Rob Furch, who owns Meridian Nursery.
Oh, okay.
So that's the property he wants to annex into the village.
Okay. Understood.
And part of the reasoning behind it was he was doing some events later at night.
Mhm.
And due to miscommunication, the county may have been thinking that they were distributing alcohol, which they weren't. And he felt that they weren't going to allow him to do his events after closing. His events were basically having items that people could come in and buy this plant or this plant in this basket, and he'd help them decorate it and create something. And he thought that he wasn't going to be able to allow to do that. He did talk to the county, and the county said, we didn't know that's what you're going to be doing. So there isn't the problem. But then we started talking about other things that he might like to do, because he's got his silos out there.
Right.
So if he had the village's zoning, he could sell alcohol. So he could have those types of events there if he annexed to the village, where if he was in the county, he couldn't.
I see.
And the county had actually recommended to him, do a pre-annexation to the city of Rockford, and then you can do what you want to do.
To the city of Rockford.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when I was talking to him, I said, you identify more with Winnebago. And they just clicked on him saying, yeah, he'd rather be in Winnebago than the city of Rockford. So that's how this came about.
So,
Good.
so yeah, I would agree that no further action on the zoning amendment, the RTMP.
The only thing I would say is that I don't see that we can get rid of the 1957 zoning ordinance, period. Because we still have enforcement issues with what have already been grandfathered in. Meaning you can't tell people now that they don't meet the set, if something's different in the UDO, they don't have to go change.
No, but I think it's one of those where you say we're going for all future things, whether it's permitting or whatever else, that the UDO is gonna be what controls. But yeah, I mean, if somebody's already come in under something, we still have to honor that all the way through until there's gonna be a requested change.
Right, so that we're not, in essence, abolishing. I mean, I get what you're saying.
Not
I just-
abolishing, we're just gonna, from here forward, we're
Right.
going to use the UDO. We're not gonna say that the 1957 never existed and won't exist. We're just gonna say for all future, anything from this day
We
forward.
don't need to combine them.
We just need to
We
say.
just need to
UDO
say,
is
we need to have a resolution saying this applies forward
starting June 1st or whatever the date's gonna be.
for any new construction, new property coming in, or zoning changes or whatever.
Or the date that it's.
Does that make sense, Mary?
Yeah, so it's because of right now, any new property, it does apply, but anything else that otherwise
Right.
would be covered.
Now, one of the issues, since this is still gonna be in existence, would be the issue I raised previously about special use permits, where the old one gave the authority in the zoning committee. The UDO says the village board. Now, I think there might be something in the UDO that says if there's a conflict, the UDO applies or covers it. But you're gonna have to make clear in whatever resolution what in the UDO overrides
Mhm.
in the old one and what doesn't. Because I don't know that it's that simple, because like the special use, there's probably 2 or 3 other things in there like the special use where they're 180 degrees different. So I think you need to be clear in the resolution saying the UDO goes forward on what it rules on and what the old one.
And if there's.
You understand what I'm saying, I think, Mary, right?
So-
I'll leave it to you to draft.
I do, but what I'm telling you is I think talking about the time frame you're talking, it sounds like we're gonna have to do a Band-Aid. I mean, if you're trying to get Rob in,
No, we don't need to do this for Rob. No, not at all.
Right.
All I'm looking at is, Bill brought up the point of, can we just say, all future pre-annexation,
Okay.
annexations use the UDO? Why
Gotcha.
can't we just say anybody for any reason use?
Because Rob, we're doing the general industrial. so that-
Right.
Okay,
So, yeah, I would just say, not at our next board meeting, but in the near future, I would like to, see an
what we
ordinance
can do.
and draft it, and then if any of you, look at the 1957 ordinance and you say, oh yeah, there's a difference between this and UDO, which would you rather like? Would you rather have special use be determined by this group at the zoning board, or would you rather have it determined by the village board? I kind of like special use being determined by the zoning board. We've done it that way. It seems to be a good separation. And if people don't like it, they can appeal to the village board. But again, that's,
And the other thing that's good too, what I think about going through the zoning board is, the zoning board generally is more in tune to what those specifics need to be for the conditions. Not to say that the general board can't do that, but that's just one more chore that they would have.
right.
I guess I'm looking at, Mary, we're not putting a Band-Aid, we're saying there's no need for a Band-Aid. We don't need to do this other configuration to make something work. And I guess do you guys have the UDO? I would like each of the zoning members to have a copy of the UDO. And then I'll talk about a little bit in new business, but what I'm planning on doing in future meetings is break this down into articles so that instead of trying to talk about the whole thing at once, which is unworkable, we'll break it down into Article 1, Article 2, or whatever. And at that meeting, we will discuss it and give any recommendations that we have as to changes to the village board. So that'll take, over a year to do, but I'm planning on doing that step by step. So if we could get a copy of that to everyone, I'd appreciate it.
Well, heck, we already did see them too.
And then,
Yes.
and I know we talked about getting, I'm assuming if we get a hard copy and a flash drive, then with the flash drive, I just know for myself, I like to use that for I want the hard one, the flash drive for searching.
Yep.
If I'm looking for where's this ad in here, I don't wanna have to look at the hard copy, but yet I don't wanna read that whole document without the hard copy.
I think, wasn't there some previous discussion about checking the 57 ordinance with the UDO for conflicts?
Yes.
I thought there was. I don't recall what we.
And that's where I think if we say, one of the things, if we say we're just gonna use the UDO from here on out, then we don't have to worry about any conflicts.
Right.
Because we're just using the UDO. But there are conflicts. And so then what we can do is if we say we're gonna use the UDO, that's great. But we know we have to modify the UDO. There are certain issues with the UDO, and we can rely on our 57 and say, hey, I like some of this language, like Bill said. Maybe we want special use to be decided by zoning. So we would change the UDO to reflect that. So if there's anything you liked in the 57 ordinance that you see is different than the UDO, then you would say, I want this to be put into the UDO. But otherwise, we would keep the 57 over here, wouldn't even look at it. We would look at the UDO, and as Bill said, go article by article, read through it, and then say, okay, do we see any issues? Or what does this mean? I mean, because you might read it and be like, I don't know what this means, so we'll talk about it at the meeting and say, okay, this is what we think it means. And then that's when we'd make our suggested changes to say, hey, yeah, I don't like this. Part of the problem, though, is you might have to look at not only Article 1, but you might look at Article 6, 10, and 12, because they may reference those same articles. So you may have to read those. So we may have to do some jumping back and forth, but we'll see it when we get there.
But I think it's something that needs to be done. And I see it as our job as the zoning committee to make recommendations. And I've seen enough of the UDO that I feel changes need to be made. So I feel that if the zoning committee agrees, I'll break it into sections, and each meeting will take 2 or 3 sections and go through it. Myself, I understand the old one much better, because that's what I was working under. And that's why Frank and I and Mary had different opinions on what the ordinance was, because I was going under the old one, because I didn't have the UDO yet. And they had forgotten, I think, that the old one had these other provisions. So give them a copy of the old one too, if you would, please.
Yeah.
And that one's short, so you can read through it and see if you like, as Frank said, if you like that better, that wording better than what's in the UDO, that might be the recommendation of this committee, that we think you go back to this way of doing it. But for everything going forward, the resolution that we're suggesting to the village would be UDO, and then we will modify that over time. Should we have a motion to make that recommendation?
Yep.
Frank, you want to go ahead and make it?
I'll make a motion that we recommend to the village board that they adopt the UDO to be used for any action, and Mary, I don't know how to state it, because it would apply to any petitions or any,
Well, it would be for really any zoning
right, any zoning
or
matter,
development.
whether it's currently existing buildings or new construction. And to take the place of the zoning ordinance of 1957.
Does that cause a problem? Because you just said existing buildings.
Yeah.
And previously we're saying the old zoning, the old part of town is still subject to the old zoning. Now, if you build a new building or you change the zoning, the UDO would apply, but I thought if you're not changing it,
Okay,
this
so
still applies,
I see what
the
you're
old
saying.
one.
That applies to everything currently, but if you go to update with a permit, or you go to do something.
Change zoning
Right, to change zoning, then you go under the UDO.
or any new annexations.
Right. So, all right, so we need to have,
Mary, do you have an idea?
I'm looking, I'm trying.
yeah,
He's ready.
Do we need verbiage that addresses any conflicts between the two?
I don't know that we need that, because we're trying to avoid the conflict by using UDO from this point
Right,
forward.
I agree with that, because
Okay.
there shouldn't be, the conflict is gonna be decided in favor of the UDO
Right.
for the going forward things.
Okay.
It's just the old,
Looking at the past.
yeah, and it's like the grandfather isn't gonna be affected by the UDO.
Right.
The grandfather properties. So we just have to come up with proper wording for that, which will be important because the resolution is gonna have to have,
Right, that particular
Proper
language
wording.
in there, yeah.
yes.
I'm trying to think of the wording for, it's not everything's a zoning
Right.
change, it's.
Right.
Certain things under the zoning of uses, you know, that kind of stuff for any changes. Change in use.
It would be cleaner if we were abolishing, but we're not ready to do that.
Correct.
We really can't, because you have people who are,
Not subject to
they're
this.
not subject to that.
Like,
Right.
you're not.
Tomorrow.
And, you know, the old part of town is not subject to all of this landscape.
I just said it would be cleaner.
Yeah, otherwise tomorrow you potentially would be going to somebody and saying, you live in the old part of town, you're in violation of such and such, you know? We certainly don't want to. We can't do this.
And it's too long, yeah, they've been in.
Right.
Change of use, yes.
Okay.
Structure is.
Yeah.
Or Mary, if you can get us something that
Yeah.
is close, then you and Frank can work on the wording for the village board, as long as they get our
Yeah,
intent.
the intent,
You just make sure that the resolution is specific enough to do what we want it to do.
Yeah, because I mean, I have, and this isn't perfect, but motion to recommend to the village board that they adopt the UDO to be
use, for any zoning changes or change in use, future development or pre-annexations or annexations, whether for currently existing or new buildings or new construction, and be in place of the zoning ordinance of 1957 that might otherwise apply. Something like that.
And I think that,
The only problem, why'd you put current existing buildings? Are you're talking improvement? to-
Yeah, because to be,
Substantial
for any zoning changes or change in use, future development, because we're saying if they make any changes, we're not making them change.
Or
now,
as Mike just said, substantial changes.
Right.
Okay,
would it,
Yeah. I think for our purposes, that's probably good enough. I think we have a meeting of minds.
and then,
We just have to get the
Right.
wording done well. And I don't know that we have to do that tonight.
no, and that's something where you said, Mary can kind of draft it, and it's up to the village board to actually adopt that resolution, so. it's
Are
just-
you guys okay with doing that, just passing this along in general wording?
Do we need a motion to direct council to formulate the verbiage and wording?
I don't know, do we have authority to direct council to do that?
I don't think so.
The village board does.
yeah, and I can tell you, the answer to your question is sometimes they say, we authorize the village attorney or direct the village attorney to do whatever, but I just do it, even if they don't
Okay.
tell me, because that's what I'm supposed to be doing. So I'm at the meeting, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah,
I know
we're all,
what
I
I'm
think
supposed
we're all
to
the
do.
same page.
Right, and anything she'll come up with, I think will relay our intent. It's just the specific wording, I think we have to get from Mary or Frank.
And they're
Because they have to be
the ones that
careful
keep
what to do. And, yeah, they're the ones who,
Right.
if they pass the wrong wording, are gonna cause problems.
Okay.
So I would make a motion, as stated by Mary. And I don't know if you want to read it again, Mary, so it'll be part of the motion.
Yeah, well, what I had was to recommend to the village board that they adopt the UDO to be used for any zoning changes or substantial changes in use, future development, pre-annexations or annexations, whether for currently existing property or new construction in the village in place of the zoning ordinance of 1957, if that might otherwise apply.
So I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Further discussion. I would ask you just to work on that a little bit more. I'm still having a little problem with the current buildings.
And
just to make sure the difference, specify a little bit better. I can't come up with better wording right now, but I would ask you to work on it as opposed to asking you to pull it out of the hat
And I would
in
also,
the 2 minutes we're talking about it.
and I would ask Mary, when she does come up with that, when it's ready to be presented to the board, that you also present to the zoning board, so we can review and see if, we have any suggested changes as well.
Okay, that would work well. And then we can reply to her individually so we don't have any open meetings issues.
Okay.
Okay, I think that's a good way of doing it.
Yeah, and I think too, if we even moved the wording to something to say to be used for any changes, and then when you say what they are, because I know your concern is that, and mine too, you don't want it to be that people think, oh my God, all of a sudden we're in violation, because that's
Right.
not what we're
It's only
talking
when they
about.
make it.
It's only when it's changes.
Right, now I have to have blacktop, I have to do this.
Right.
Yeah.
We're not implying that.
Okay.
Now, I don't want the village to think that they're doing that either, which would be unfair to those people.
Right.
So I want it to be clear that they aren't doing that.
Yeah.
Okay, end of discussion. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Eubank?
Yes.
Pinckney?
Yes.
Booker?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, next matter for discussion is the draft of the solar ordinance. Do you guys each have a copy of the solar ordinance? That was, there was one that was passed out originally by Mary, and then there was a second one that Mary sent us that has some redlining on it.
And then Kelly resent that after the last.
Are we gonna go through it tonight? or
No.
just- No, so don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. I want to know if, I want everybody to have a paper copy of that. And I myself have written comments that I took to the open house that I'm going to pass, I'm going to give to Kelly to give to each of the zoning members. I am going to go through, I do not have the capability of redlining on my computer, so I'm going to just write in red ink some of my changes, Mark. Some are changes that I think would need to be made anyway, and some would be much bigger changes. I've talked to Mike about it, I've talked to Frank about it, I haven't talked to you, but I have major issues with this, mainly what type of zoning classifications solar farms should be allowed to operate in. I think that it should be under our general industrial, because I think it is general industrial. But that's just my opinion. I want to get input from the rest of the committee members. We went through it last time, kind of paragraph by paragraph, and we came up with, well, we didn't do the solar, we did the RTMP. So what I would like to do is give everybody the next month to look at what Mary came up with, which my understanding basically was a copy or plagiarism of what Rochelle has.
Not just Rochelle, there's, I mean, it's a combination.
Combination of
And then it
them.
also contains the comments from Trajectory Energy.
Right, I'm starting with your first one.
Oh, sorry.
You came up with it.
Yep.
This is not, you came up with it, but you took input from lots of other ordinances, and this is just something you came up with based on what other people had.
Yes.
Then Trajectory gave their opinion to it.
Yep.
I have given some opinions to it. I would like each of the board members to have time to sit down and go through it and come up with your own comments. And then I don't know if we'd be able to finish it all at our next meeting. I'm thinking it might take a couple meetings because it's kind of long. But I feel that this is important enough that we should put time into it and everybody give their ideas and input to come up with a better product that I think should be given to the village board. And I'm not criticizing Mary at all when I say the better product. She put together what other municipalities have, but there were certain things I think weren't really looked at for the village.
Similar to the process we use for the RTMP.
Yes.
The only thing that I would say is that if you want to get me your comments, I don't care if they're handwritten, I don't care how they are, then I can incorporate them into a red line and then, you know, on a comment section, say who they came from, so that when you discuss it, we have it all in one document, if you choose.
So that would be the preferred thing is before the next zoning board meeting, if you have the opportunity to look through it and you have some ideas or questions, either way, then you just email Mary or you somehow write them down and get them to Mary. She'll be our conduit and then she can fix them all to a final document for review. And then we can disseminate that, discuss it at the meeting. If we're kind of all in agreement with, hey, yeah, they all look right, great. You know, then we can tell Mary to do the final thing and we can take a final look at it. But, you know, you may have some ideas, you may have some ideas, and I may have some ideas, and they may conflict. Or you may have questions about my things, and so we can't discuss it until we get to the meeting, and then I can tell you why I'm thinking that. So if we can get our comments all to her, then it allows us to start to have a fruitful discussion at the next meeting.
And in that way, and it's not expected that you're, I mean, you can if you want, if you have some preferred language, you can tell me, but I won't necessarily make those changes because that's not saying that's everybody's.
Right.
You know, but I'll make it in a commentary to say,
that, Riley wants this, or Mike likes this, or even if you have a
Yeah.
question to say,
Yeah.
this doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily that I'm gonna respond to you and explain it to me, but if I can, but, I'm just saying that there's it's being brought up to the group that says, I don't like this, or it doesn't make sense.
And then I guess the next thing I'd like to bring up is, do you think that 1 month is sufficient for you, or 2 months to actually get the time to get into this document and come up with your own ideas? Like, some of the things I've thought of is, the village has its long-range planning, where it wants to go, where it wants to expand annexation-wise. Should that be considered more by the village before it gets into where it wants to put these solar farms? If it's gonna be like it is in this document, where it's every zoning classification other than residential, that includes agricultural. And the one that we're talking about here that you have in front of you, Mike, if the village plans on annexing out towards Meridian Road in the future, well, you've got residential here. That's zoned residential right now. They would have to change it to something else. But if it was changed to agricultural, you go the next farm over, now you're at Westridge. And so where's the village want to put its business? Where does it want to put its industrial? I don't know if the village has done long-range planning since 2007 or something. So I guess with all the concerns that I've come up with, I will do my best to get it all done in March, but if you guys, in looking at it and hearing some of what I've talked about, if an extra month would help you really digest it and think, if we're gonna have it, I do agree with Mary and Frank that the village has to address the solar farm issue somehow. And so there's going to be individual panels, and there's gonna be the farm issue. And they separated them, which I think was a good idea. As for the farm issue, my main thing is, where should it be? And again, I think it should be industrial, because it's really an industrial use. Should it be down by the corners? Should it be out by the tanks? And, those are, I guess that's a simple change. If you're going to then also get into the nuts and bolts of it, of what type, if we're gonna have a solar farm, what types of restrictions do we need? For example, if the committee was to, and the county and the village board go against my thoughts and say, yeah, we want to go ahead and have it in the agricultural areas, well, then I'm going to be coming up with, well, if you're going to do this, I think they should be fixed panels. They should only be so high. They should not be visible from so many feet from residential. Those are a lot of things that our UDO has. And so the more I was getting into that, the more complex it gets, because it's almost I don't know it's an all or nothing, because I think something has to be passed. Simply from my point of view, say it's industrial, and then it's easy fixes. But if in fact the village board is going to go with we'll put it in any zoning classification other than residential, then I think that this committee also needs to make suggestions on, if you do this anyway, then you need to make these changes, which might not be necessary if you don't do that. I don't see myself having a 15 to 20 foot panel that moves right across the street from residential. If you had that down on Route 20, I don't know that I'd really be opposed to it, because it is a commercial area.
Right.
So you almost have to look at it two ways. One, on what you think would be best, and then two, if you don't go this, how about this? So I would almost like to push it off till the April meeting myself, but if you guys think that you would be ready to start, and I don't want to do it all in one night and keep you here till 10:30 or 11. So I'd like to break it into 2 sections. But I would also like to give you guys time to really think about it. So that's why I wanted to give my initial thoughts here. I will give to you what I passed out at that open house, so you kind of see my thought process. And then you don't have to agree with me, but I want you to think about things because you might have other ideas that I'm not thinking about. And to me, that could be a lot of work to do by March meeting, but
I would make a suggestion that we put this on the agenda for March with the idea of what you're saying is that we may not be ready to discuss it in detail. Really what will allow us to know that is if we get enough responses back before the March meeting. If we don't get responses back, then what we want to know is, maybe you looked at it and you're like, I don't understand this, I will never understand this, so I'm not gonna give any comments. Or you might say, everything looks good, so I'm not gonna make any changes. You know, if you want to respond that way, then at least we know, okay, each person is taking a look at it and we are not gonna get any additional responses. So, you know, what I would say is each person respond with something, either need more time or I'm not gonna give a response.
That's what I would say, is let's agenda it for March
Yeah.
with the understanding that we may need to push it off.
Yep.
If we don't get through it all. But
And not to put a monkey wrench in this whole thing, like, as you may or may not be aware, Governor Pritzker signed into law a law having to do with solar. And
But that's what
Now-
counties.
I understand, but I think they'll be coming to us soon.
They may, but they may not, because counties could be different animals. So my thought is this, initially I was kind of concerned, but I'm gonna be like municipality, we're just gonna move forward with what we want. We're gonna design it the way we want. If the state government decides otherwise, then we have to adapt. But until then, I wanna put in there what I wanna put in there. I'm not gonna put in there what I fear may be coming down our way, because they may never make a municipality change like the county. Because the county, I think, they're more concerned with the larger areas and how the counties are dealing with it. They have more control over farmland, whereas municipalities don't have a lot of farmland in there. And so I think that's really what they were looking at is,
and there's the open space
Yeah.
in the county where you really don't have, we have open space agricultural, but in my opinion, that's because we expanded and we're allowing the farmers, as we expanded, to do what they've been doing for 100 years. But it's not the intent that they are going to continue to farm forever. So does a village really have agricultural zoning? You know, is the village really gonna want farms long-term? It's kind of holding place until the new development. Where the county is where you have all those open areas, and so that's where the solar farms are gonna be built, and they're gonna tend to be built in the agricultural. But are we really agricultural? If we're agricultural, why are we annexing it? Other than to get to somewhere else, and then if we're doing it to get to somewhere else, what are we doing on, what's the in-between area? What's the best use for that?
And I think that generally speaking, we can be more restrictive, but not less restrictive. Is that correct?
You can be, more restrictive.
Well, with respect to the counties, the governor basically said, you guys gotta do what we say.
Yeah.
That's
So
what
that-
I've been told by the county zoning.
Yeah, that's what it
Committee.
basically says, that
They usurped the power.
it prohibits,
nothing you can do.
yeah.
You did it.
Yeah, to go back to with that plot of land in specific, so what procs our concerns of it being so close to residential and stuff like that, and the zoning, the location of the land. If we all agree that if we all end up agreeing in March that it is a problem, like what's the solution? If we could move it, or how would we go about that?
so I think what we would look at is, we're looking at a solar ordinance to be put in place for any use. I mean, we need one for whether it's gonna be ground array or on a building, like you might want one on your house. So we have to have a solar ordinance that's going to address if you're gonna have it on a residential, on your house, or can you have it on your ground? My preference is, I don't wanna see ground array in a residential area. I think it is terrible. But I think it should be allowed on your building, on your house. Then you get to the solar farm and the ground array part, and you say, okay, we will designate that, and where should that be? And so we do have a business that is interested in coming to the village, but I think we have to separate that from what we're working on. What we're working on is the solar ordinance. And how is that going to work? And where do we want it? And Joel alluded to our comprehensive plan. 2007, Bill, you were right on. That's when we did our last comprehensive plan. And it shows what the future looks like. And the area that we're looking at, you know, we have a lot of residential. All the yellow is residential. Okay. Green is park space. We've got red, which is business district, general business district. So that's.
What road is that up there?
This is 20, the white up there is 20. So this is the corners and then expanding from the corners.
Gotcha.
Then we have light and like some type of industrial here, lighter industrial, and then we have all residential in this area. And then this is, I think, where the cemetery is, over here off of 20. And then we have a park over here. So this is where we have the residential way over there off of Weldon. Okay. So this whole area is, the future back in 2007 was to all be residential. So as Bill's talking about is we have to look at, do we want to have a solar farm in a residential area that's planned to be residential, or do we not want to have that? And do we want to even allow as a use in a residential area for a ground array? And that's what we have to come up with in our solar ordinance. What do we want to use? So this is something that I sent out to you, our use map. I didn't have this. So Kelly, I don't know if we have this particular map somehow electronically. I was never made aware that we had this whole thing electronically. We may not.
I think I did find it electronically. Bill, didn't I send a copy to you?
The comprehensive plan? Because I don't have one electronically. So if you find one.
You gave me the study.
Okay.
There was actually a study that some commission
Okay.
put together, it's about like 17 pages
So
long.
I'm going to give this
Take that
back to you.
and scan it.
And at a minimum, if you could scan the map,
Mhm.
that will help us understand that. Because the rest of the stuff is just a bunch of gobbledygook that we had to have for some permission or some grant we're applying for. But that's the main thing I think we need to.
You know, I guess Riley, what I would suggest is, if the village, some people in the village, I say Frank, I think you would like to get out to Meridian ultimately someday.
Right.
For the village.
Yeah.
Well, to me, that's an industrial area anyway. A solar farm in an industrial area, I don't think is a bad fit, as opposed to next to residential. Something, you know, if the village wanted to annex more property and dedicate it towards industrial, that would be great. And that's where a solar farm, I think, would be more appropriately put. The zoning should be, you know, there should be buffer from the industrial to the residential.
I'm going to jump in. I believe our current zoning says that if we have industrial, we would not have industrial right next to residential. So unless there's a special waiver. So
Well, that's what, there would be a
So there have to be
buffer.
something like a buffer.
Yeah, there'd be some-
That is right along with what our
Right,
ordinance
buffer.
says.
And so there are areas that the village wanted to expand and wanted to expand in the industrial sense. It could expand if people wanted to annex in, there's land that could be done. I have issues where they're putting it right now, but the main issue was all zoning classifications, I think is inappropriate. You know, all zoning classifications other than residential, I personally believe is way too broad. But the village, I do agree, should look forward, and if somebody wants to have a solar farm in the village and there is some land, here's what needs to be zoned, and plan on that zoning in that area, so you have your long-range plans. So if it gets to it someday, yeah, it's gonna be out over here, or it's gonna be down over there.
Mary, in the ordinance draft that you've given us, is there a specific designation for solar farms? What they fall into? Do they fall under general industrial, general business, ag?
No, it's that they're allowed, again, taking from other places how they did it, that you could do it anywhere except residential.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm with you, that is very broad.
And so there's the broad arguments, or things we have to think about, the broad issues, but there's also the minute issues. And
Right.
if it was to happen, and even if it was in a industrial area, you know, like down by the corners or something, how tall do you want these things
What
to
is the
be?
buffer?
What is the buffer?
What's the
Can you see? Yeah.
trees?
How tall can they be? Can they move?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you have something down by 20 where you got all the traffic anyway, the fact that those panels are moving, and there's gonna be a noise if it moves. There has to be, because there's friction happening. And there might be a little bit of humming, I don't know, but if it's down by the corners, you got noise down there anyway. If it's where they were planning here, just for an example, you got people living right across the street. But we are mainly zoning, and so the first thing I would argue myself is it should be limited to industrial or maybe business, I don't know, I'd have to, it could be business, but yet so far away from residential. I'm not opposed to it happening in an appropriate place, and the appropriate place might be someplace in the future that's gonna be the village. I know I suggested that the people who put the open house on, I said, just go buy the property that they have for sale down by
With the 200
the
acres.
subway right now.
Right.
Well, there's 29 acres there.
Off of McNair Road,
Well, there's 200 acres off of 20. There's 200 acres there, plus there's 29 acres right next to Sullivan's and the storage unit.
They don't want to sell at a reasonable price.
the property in McNair, does that extend down to 20? That's for sale? There's a sign right there next to.
Right, that goes all the way down to 20. So I think it goes from McNair down to 20, and that's the 200 acres.
Okay, yeah, okay.
And so the north end of that might be an appropriate place for the village long-range planning, if you want to put more heavy industrial uses. Out by Meridian, where it's heavy industrial already.
What I would ask.
That comes into the planning aspect of it, but those are the reasons why I think it's more than a one meeting discussion once we get into it, because as we're discussing the larger issues, and then we get to that, there's lots of
And the minutiae.
smaller, yeah. But I will do my best to get my comments out before the March meeting. I just wanted to explain why I don't think it would happen, at least in entirety, that night.
Okay.
And now we get to old business, the variance, with respect to 312. I've not heard back from that.
I'll give a quick update. I did talk to Jason, one of the property owners, and he had gone through looking at the UDO, and he did question whether it was adopted properly. He followed up with Mary, and Mary was able to find that even though there wasn't, how it came before the board was, it was coming from committee. Although the committee didn't vote on it at a committee level, came up to the board, it was assumed that it did have come up from the committee, so there was never a second at the board level. But Mary found out that Robert's Rules of Order states that if you discuss an item, it's on the agenda, and you take a motion and then you vote on the motion, it makes it null, a nullity that it wasn't brought up from the committee, so that it actually passed and it is valid. So that was one thing that we looked into, found out the answer. He's like, okay, that's fine. And he was just trying to look at the history of the whole thing just to get an understanding of where things were. But he was going to be talking with Chad, our public works director, and Casper, our building inspector, because those two do have the ability to talk about the right of way and what can or can't be included in the right of way. I believe the building inspector, through discussions with the public works director, have the ability to allow a business owner to put improvements on the right of way if they believe it's necessary, or they can say, no, we don't think it's appropriate to put it in the right of way. So I know he was gonna have that discussion to find out whether he could plant anything. I know he talked to me a little bit about, Chad had concerns about planting things so the roots would go down into the piping and other things, and they had concerns about the deepness of roots going, so they might not want anything there. So he was gonna be following up on those things and then report back. So he wanted to have that information to be able to present to the zoning board as to maybe where they could put things or where they couldn't put things, and get that information.
Is he going to follow through with giving us the square footage of the asphalt so we know what's required?
I believe so, but it wouldn't hurt to have that sent out again to him. So Mary, if you could do that, just say that the zoning board is interested in getting that information. Because, yeah, we don't want him to forget about that.
All right, and I guess I would, instead of just leaving it month by month, I personally would rather just say it's gonna be on the agenda in May, and then he's got a deadline, you gotta do something.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're going to rule upon the variance, because we've put it off now for almost a year. And if we just put it on every month, it's easy to take it off, so.
Mary, why don't you ask him if he'd rather have it on the May or the June meeting?
May or June is fine.
And then they can select which time they want it heard, and then they can work towards it.
Okay.
And then a
that's fine.
recommendation that they provide to us information at least 3 weeks prior to the meeting so that we have the opportunity to review it. Because then we can formulate what questions we may want to ask at the hearing.
Does that sound okay to you guys?
Yeah, no, that sounds fine.
Okay. So Mary, just get back to me so I know which
Okay.
month to put it on, and then we'll put it on.
Bill, I think some time ago, you said you were gonna try to sit down with him. Did that ever happen?
Yes.
Okay.
The three of us were able to sit down with Jason and Teresa, and we had a good discussion.
We had a good discussion, and I told him he's got arguments. If he wanted to go to court, he might win. He told me he didn't want to go to court and fight it, but then he started looking at things. So I don't know where he's coming
That's
from.
what I'm confused, because all we're looking for is a little movement, and it sounds like he's looking more at, the Robert's Rules and Orders, the process than what we're looking for.
Which means I think that we got to say, let's give a certain date. Either he comes in with a new petition for a variance, or we
Right.
have a decision on the pending one.
Okay.
So,
And
yeah,
just-
it was an amicable meeting. Yeah, personally, I don't think he wants to do it, but he doesn't want to fight it, and so he's kind of, what do I do?
I think from my perspective, I think he's trying to do what needs to be done, but there hasn't been a clear set of rules to follow what needs to be done. Because we did have different employees, including the previous building inspector, provide responses in his mind meant that they didn't have to do things.
No question.
And so I think that started the whole problem. If we had started back over again with the right directions, there would be no question he would have followed them. I mean, he does landscaping. So he's not opposed to have done landscaping, but now with the building in place and the roadway in place, where's he gonna put the landscaping?
Then we changed the rules in the middle of the game.
Right.
No,
So
no,
that-
there's no
Yeah,
question.
so I understand.
So that's why so then he's going back to talk to the public works director and to the new building inspector, because that's what the UDO says, and he's gonna follow through and say, okay, Now, this is what I'm required to do, but also if you tell me that I can't do certain things, then I can't. And then that limits what I can or can't do. Or if I can do things, what am I allowed to do? So he's trying to follow it now. It's just, we got him back on that.
Yeah,
track.
and I don't mean he's acting in bad faith or anything. He was allowed to do what he did in his mind, so why should he have to spend money to do something extra? But it's unfortunate situation, which is why I told him, you go to court, you might win. And that's what we based some of our variances on when we gave him variances. It's an awkward situation, but we have to bring it to a
It's gonna
head.
require movement on both parts.
Right,
Yes.
exactly, yeah. So I think a deadline is good.
And just to be clear, the village board did not act improperly, I mean, in the sense that the representation was made. Frank asked the question, is this motion coming from committee? And the answer was yes.
Yeah.
And therefore it did not need a second. And then it turned out that apparently it didn't come from committee, and that every time Frank asked, did it come from committee, we don't say, okay, show us the minutes where it came from committee,
Right.
so.
And Riley, I don't know if you know enough about this, but part of the issue was when he started building, he got a building permit, he shouldn't have got it. But he got it from the village. So he thought he could build, he thought he could do what he was doing. So there were mistakes both ways. So it is an awkward situation, but we can't just ignore it. It's got to go one way or the other and get resolved.
And Bill, I don't know if you know, but Riley owns the house right across from there.
Oh, I don't know that.
Well, by the time I owned it, I was already existing.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't know the whole story about
Yeah.
that.
So I mean, there's lots of issues there. So he's not acting in bad faith at all. And if I was him, I might be doing it differently. He wants to work it out, but he's got to bring something to us, or we've got to make him do something to us. I guess if he doesn't, and we rule and we deny it, then we're faced with, what's the village do now? They got a guy who's violated their zoning. Do they issue a citation to a village board member? We were trying to avoid that happening.
And the whole thing about needing to know the square footages to the asphalt is determines what landscaping, how much they need.
Because that's in
What
the
and how much.
UDO. The UDO says this much blacktop, you need these many things. So that's how it all kind of ties together. New business. Kelly brought up to me that in going through our old minutes, the fire department, Winburn Sioux, came to the zoning committee a long time ago about pre-annexing some property out on Kelly Road. And is that still kind of an open issue? Should we talk to them? And then also, if we get the plan that these two guys want to put the storage units, I would like that to be received in time. We could give that to the fire department to see if they have issues with respect to access to get where they need to if there's a fire there. So Kelly offered to contact the fire chief herself to me, but I was wondering, I know that Irv seems to know a lot about the fire. I just wanted to bring up to you guys, do you think we should contact them, and how should we go about it? Because I think those are the two issues. Are they still interested in that out there, or maybe Frank knows? Because they came to us and had plans, and they did put some things out there. It's at the railroad tracks,
So you know
Westfield,
where the lawn-
and they wanted to
lawn
put a
is?
training facility out there.
So I can answer both of these things.
Okay.
So the first thing is, well, I can give some information. The first thing about Winburn Sioux and that property they wanted to pre-annex, that was through Chief Rob Martin, who was the chief at the time. And he wanted to get that pre-annex so they could use it as a training facility. So we were going to go forward and we were going to do that. He said that might even be a way to try and get the Longs into the village. Maybe kind of talk to them and see if they would pre-annex to the village. Because what Windber Sioux is trying to do with pre-annexation is trying to keep all of the properties that are in the Windber Sioux Fire District within the Windber Sioux Fire District and not go to Rockford or some other place where they would come outside of the Windber Sioux Fire District. So,
Then we lose tax.
so we lose the tax revenue
because of
the
that.
fire district. So having that facility there, he thought, okay, it would also allow for the village to do anything with zoning rather than the county in case they encountered any issues. But it was also around the same time that he was going to retire. So I think what happened is it got into the mix of he was going to retirement and he wasn't able to push this forward and he retired. Well, then there was nobody at the Windber Sioux Fire Department to move this forward. So I think it just came out of the loop and they really don't know that this was sitting out there. I don't think Chief Dave Loria really knows that that's sitting there as an opportunity to pre-annex to the village. So I would say that yes, we need to get to Dave Loria and say this is it. I don't mind if I do it. I don't mind.
That's fine. I just,
Or Kelly, if you have enough.
Well, there was one other thing too,
okay,
and that was, that property out there was never, they never filed for tax exemption. So when I was looking into it, I saw that, and that was one of my questions I was gonna ask them too,
Okay.
is if they're paying taxes on that property, and maybe that also fell through the cracks too for them, that they should maybe look into it, if that's what they want to do.
and personally, I don't, you could do it, Frank, as the president. Kelly, if
you want to do it.
any particular board member had an in with the fire department, if they wanted to do it, I just wanted some coordination here from this committee, who was gonna do it on behalf of the committee.
Kelly, if you don't mind sending an email to Dave Loria and then copying me on it and Bill on it at least, because I can sit down with Dave and talk with him more about it, but you have the opportunity, I think, to initially let him know.
That's okay.
Because that
Yeah.
if they need
Yeah,
materials,
thank you.
he might not even have the stuff
Right.
that Rob gave us,
Right.
or not know where it's at.
That's
See, I don't have any documents whatsoever. I just,
Mary, do you?
I think we,
I have one email about the subject, I believe.
I only found it in some minutes,
Yeah.
and that was all I saw.
They're gonna do training, they were gonna bring out, and they did bring out some big containers.
Yeah.
And
It
they,
was July
Yeah, I
of
wondered who was doing
2019.
that, yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
It was in
I'll
the
look
minutes for zoning in July of 2019.
okay. And I can check, because if they brought anything, I would have attached it to my handwritten
Yeah.
notes.
There was discussion about the zoning of the property, is all I can remember right now, but.
The second thing, Bill, you brought up was Windber Sioux Fire Department with relationship to
The special-
the cash
special
structure.
permitted use, yes.
And I think that's a little premature, and here's why. When we as a zoning board are considering special use, we're looking at an intended use. And I don't think that we need to look to the fire department at this point to say, is there gonna be enough room for you to get around? Because that's the building plan, that's the permitting process, and that we send plans to the Windber Sioux Fire Chief. And the Windber Sioux Fire Chief and the Public Works Director and a bunch of other people take a look at those plans. There's 14 copies. And that's when Windber Sioux takes a look at it and says, okay, the drive allows enough for a turnaround for one of our vehicles. Where you have it set up, yes, we have the ability to fight the fires or whatever. They'll look at the plans of the building at that point. But I don't know that we need Windber Sioux's response to say, should we allow storage units there or not? I don't know that this is the time that we would.
Okay, now I was just thinking along the lines of the requirements we could place upon them.
Right, there are requirements, but I don't know that that's something that we would look at as, that's something Windber Sioux would require when they get the plans. I mean, they have the full authority to say, we're not gonna approve these plans because they don't meet our requirements for having enough room for a vehicle to turn around or to get in there, or it's too tall. They can nix that.
So they can stop it there anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
And Kelly, did you run across anything else?
I do have another item under new business,
Okay.
if you are taking new items.
Yes.
We talked about Meridian Nursery and the pre-annexation agreement, and I just wanted to let you know that Rob First, the owner, was asking me about an update, what's the time frame? And kind of like what we're doing with the other property on Cash Drive, kind of laying out when this will be done, when that'll be done. Mary and Bill and I did meet with, or talk to Rob. We met at my office and we talked about this situation, and we talked to Rob on the phone and gave him kind of a general layout. But it's been a little while since we had our meeting. I think that was in January. And he just wants to know that, you know, what's the next step? Is the next step a public hearing? And if it's a public hearing on it, when would that likely be? Because he wants to know when the process will be so that he can start setting events if it's approved. And so Mary, I think the next step would be the pre-annexation agreement. And that comes before the zoning board, or is that the village board?
That's the village board, but we have to deal with the zoning.
Right, so do we do the
The
zoning
zoning
first?
first,
And then, so we need to have a public hearing on the zoning.
on the zoning, because we're not the RTMP anymore, but we still have a zoning change.
Has he filed a request?
He's filed a petition for annexation. He has not filed a specific request because we don't have any documents really. Do we have a document that he fills out? No. Typically, it's just a written or oral, you know, telephone call saying, hey, I need to do this, and then we set it on the zoning board.
Okay,
Because we've not adopted that zoning packet yet.
okay,
Probably need to make some changes to it. So in my mind, he's requested it, and we have his petition for annexation, and he wants general industrial. So I think we could move forward with a public hearing.
okay.
So if you don't
Can we
mind,
do two in one night?
I was gonna say, we
Yep.
could do them both at that same time. It'd be more efficient. So, I mean, if you're agreeable to that,
Because they both have the same time frame, and
Yeah.
that has to be not less than 15 or more than 30, you know, so that.
do we need a motion?
Okay, yeah, let's have a motion on that with a roll call.
I'll make the motion to have a hearing regarding the pre-annexation agreement
And
with
actually,
Meridian.
just so we're clear, it's on the zoning for that property. We can't do the pre-annexation yet.
Okay, all right, so for the zoning,
Zoning change.
okay, for the zoning, and we do it at 650, or I mean 550?
555. Well, we can.
Well, the other one's at 555.
You can still do it later.
Pardon me?
You can do one, and then you can follow through with the next one.
So you don't have,
You don't
you
have
don't
to
have to set two times.
Right,
Okay,
and the reason why we're doing the 5:55 is, in the old days, we had a lot of dead time. We'd schedule it for 5:30,
right.
and then you're
Right.
sitting there, because
For half an hour.
most times, nobody shows up.
Okay.
So we schedule it 5 minutes ahead of time, and if we run late, then like, we've got our meeting scheduled for 6, we don't start till 6:10.
Right.
Well, that's gonna be the same thing as public hearing. We're
Okay.
both scheduled for 5:55,
Sure.
but one of them might not start till 6:05.
Okay,
But I'd suggest at the same time, otherwise you got
Okay.
that time.
all right,
So,
I'll make that motion.
okay, I'll second that.
Roll call vote, please.
Pitney,
Yes.
Booker,
Yes.
Emmer,
Yes.
Yes.
Any other new business? Entertain a motion to adjourn?
And I'll just say, I'll do,
Okay.
once I put together the timing, and then I'll do an email. So
Okay.
he's got that as well, and with everybody, but
Okay.
just of when, you know, when we have to publish it. So.
Yeah, so yeah, an email to each applicant.
Now, in the notice, you're gonna have to put what he wants it changed to.
Yes,
So he needs to tell you the general industrial or.
it's on the
Sorry.
It's in
petition.
the petition.
Oh, he already put that in
He's
the
already put it in
petition?
the petition.
He put
Okay.
that or RTMP.
Oh, he put either one, okay. Good enough.
He had good counsel to, you know, how to put it.
Okay, motion to adjourn?
Do you want a second?
Brandon, you second? Okay.
I'll second it, yep.
Vote, roll call?
Booker,
Yes.
Emmer,
Yes.
Eubank,
Yes.
Pitney.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so the meeting's adjourned. I'll go ahead and stop the recording.